You know, usually when we think about a major investigation, whether it's like a massive corporate fraud or some dramatic true crime event, we kind of carry around this expectation,
Right?
right?
Like we're waiting for the cinematic aha moment.
Exactly. We want the tearful confession in the dimly lit room or, the smoking gun document left on the photocopier.
Yeah, some undeniable proof that just blows the case wide open and makes everything make sense instantly.
Because that's how the story always plays out in movies.
Yeah.
The villain makes a catastrophic, obvious mistake.
Right. But the reality of uncovering hidden truths is honestly so much quieter and a lot more tedious than that.
Totally. And today we are taking a deep dive into an approach that completely shatters that cinematic illusion. We're exploring this really fascinating crossover between two entirely different worlds.
It really is fascinating.
Yeah, we're taking the rigorous, meticulous methodologies of financial fraud investigation and applying those exact principles to something deeply human, which is the safeguarding of vulnerable students.
I mean, it sounds like an unlikely pairing at first.
Yeah.
But the overlap is incredibly revealing. We're drawing on a framework today titled What a DSL Can Learn from a Forensic Accountant.
And just for those of you listening outside the education world, a DSL is a designated safeguarding lead.
Right.
These are the people on the front lines in schools or community organizations. They hold the primary responsibility for catching vulnerable kids before they fall through the cracks,
Yeah, supporting their well-being and intervening when a child might be at risk.
Exactly. So whether you manage a corporate team, lead a school, or you're just fascinated by how hidden truths are actually uncovered in the real world, this deep dive is going to completely reframe how you look at what we call ordinary information.
Because the foundational reality here, the thing that forensic accountants know in their bones and rely on every single day, is that fraud rarely announces itself.
Right, it doesn't just wave a flag.
No, not at all. People committing financial crimes almost never start with a dramatic confession. They don't leave obvious trails. They start with a tiny, quiet inconsistency.
Like what kind of inconsistency?
Well, like a single number on a spreadsheet that is slightly out of place.
Yeah.
Or, a missing signature on a completely routine administrative form.
Ah, okay.
Or maybe a sequence of dates that almost makes sense, but doesn't quite line up when you really hold it to the light. It's a pattern that feels completely mundane until you actually take the time to examine it carefully.
And that is the exact bridge to the world of the DSL, right? Safeguarding concerns don't emerge neatly either.
No, they really don't.
A vulnerable student rarely just walks into a counselor's office, sits down, and delivers this perfectly articulated chronological account of the harm they're experiencing.
It just doesn't happen that way.
Right. Instead, the issues show up as a trail of tiny behaviors that they kind of stop making sense when you view them together over time.
Precisely. The overlap relies on understanding that or frequent low-level visits to the school nurse for vague stomach aches that just never seem to have a medical cause. Or maybe it's a gradual disengagement from a friend group they've been attached to for years.
It's like finding a tiny water stain on the ceiling.
Oh, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah, because the problem isn't the stain, right? The problem is the slow leak in the pipes behind the drywall that you can't see yet.
Absolutely.
But here's the catch. If you're a busy teacher managing 30 kids or a manager with a massive project deadline, you are heavily incentivized to just paint over the stain.
Right, because you just don't have the time.
Exactly. You do not have the time or the energy to rip out the drywall on a Tuesday afternoon. So how do professionals actually force themselves to look deeper when the system is already demanding so much of their time?
Well, that is the perennial challenge of any investigative or safeguarding work. You don't necessarily rip out the drywall the moment you see the stain, but you must meticulously map where and when the stains are appearing. Because harm frequently leaves traces before it leaves disclosures. A student might not be ready or even developmentally able to articulate what is happening to them.
Right.
But their environment will reflect it. The increasing unexplained absences, the withdrawn posture in math class, the sudden drop in homework quality, those are the traces.
So it's about tracking them.
Exactly. The professional discipline is building a system that logs those traces effortlessly. So the burden isn't on one exhausted teacher to tear down the walls, but on a system to recognize that the building is damp.
Okay, so we're mapping the traces that are there.
Yeah.
The presence of a new behavior, the presence of a late arrival. But there's another layer to this methodology that really caught my attention.
The weight of absence.
Yes. What happens when the most alarming clue is something that isn't there? Or a story that just slightly misses the mark?
This is so critical. Forensic accountants are specifically trained to investigate narratives that possess subtle contradictions. They don't just look at what's on the ledger. They look for records that feel incomplete. If a financial director explains a budget shortfall and the explanation shifts just slightly every time they are asked about it,
That's a problem.
yes, that inconsistency deserves intense curiosity, not immediate acceptance.
So for a DSL, this looks like a student whose account of how they got a bruised arm over the weekend changes depending on who asks.
Right.
Like to the gym teacher, they fell off a bike.
Yeah.
But to the homeroom teacher, they tripped on the stairs.
Exactly. Or maybe it's a student whose emotional response feels totally incongruent with their presentation.
What do you mean by incongruent?
Like, they're describing a deeply distressing event, but their affect is completely flat. Or conversely, they are overly, artificially cheerful in a way that just feels forced and unnatural.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Professional curiosity has to begin with recognizing those inconsistencies rather than demanding certainty up front.
Right, because a shifting story isn't automatic proof of harm.
No, but it is an undeniable indicator that the professional needs a deeper understanding of what is actually going on.
But I have to push back here for a second, because human nature works entirely against this.
It really does.
Like, we are neurologically wired for narrative completion. We want things to make sense. If a student gives an excuse for being late that is 90% plausible, our brains desperately want to accept the 90%, fill in the blanks for the remaining 10%, and just, move on with the day.
Absolutely.
So how does someone train themselves to stay curious instead of rushing to a premature judgment or just accepting the easy answer?
You combat that instinct by training yourself to recognize the power of silence. We are so conditioned to look for noise, for the disruption, the argument, the crying.
Right. The loud stuff.
Yeah. But in the financial world, a missing transaction or silence where evidence should normally exist is a massive red flag.
Yep.
Let's say you have sequentially numbered invoices.
Okay.
You see invoice 101, 102, and 105. Forensic accountants know that the existence of 101 and 105 isn't the story.
The absence of 103 and 104 is the story.
Exactly. The silence is the data.
And in a human educational setting, how does that silence manifest? Because, kids aren't sequentially numbered invoices.
Well, in safeguarding, absence takes many forms. It could be a student's sudden emotional withdrawal, like a kid who used to be chatty and disruptive in the back row is now sitting completely still and totally silent.
Oh, yeah.
Or it could be a lack of emotional engagement from a parent during a meeting where you normally expect concern or anger. It could be a student's sudden disappearance from an extracurricular activity they previously loved.
That makes sense for the student, but it also applies to the adults in the building too, right?
Emphatically, yes. This is a crucial mechanism. Gaps in safeguarding recording are glaring indicators.
Like when no one is writing anything down?
Exactly. Imagine a student who has a known history of vulnerability. They've been on the radar for years. Suddenly, for 6 months, there's complete silence in their file.
No logs, no updates.
Right. No staff members are logging any concerns. That absence is highly significant.
Right.
Are staff avoiding documenting concerns because they feel overwhelmed by the process?
Or maybe they've just become desensitized to the student's behavior.
Exactly.
Yeah.
What is missing from the safeguarding systems often matters just as much as what is visible within them.
I really want you listening to pause and think about that no matter what industry you work in. Silence itself can be the most critical indicator you have.
It really can.
A lack of complaints doesn't always mean a system is working perfectly. Sometimes it means people have just given up on the system entirely.
Which forces a massive shift in leadership perspective. Leaders have to actively encourage their teams to explore missing information thoughtfully.
Yeah.
You have to structurally build a culture where low-level concerns are valued so that silence doesn't become the default setting when people get busy.
Which naturally brings us to the logistical nightmare of all this.
Oh, definitely.
I mean, we are talking about mapping tiny water stains, tracking subtle mood shifts, slate changes in attendance, and deafening silences. If I'm a designated safeguarding lead, how on earth do I pull all this together without drowning in white noise?
You rely on the twin pillars of forensic work: context and precision.
Context and precision, yeah.
Yeah. A forensic accountant knows that a suspicious transaction means absolutely nothing without context. If you are auditing a company and you see a sudden $5,000 expense hitting the ledger, is that fraud?
I mean, it could be.
It could be. Or it is just the quarterly rent payment for the warehouse. You literally cannot know without pattern comparison and a wider understanding of the company's baseline operations.
Right. So applying that to the classroom, a teenager putting their head down on the desk during third period is just a tired teenager. If a teacher logs every time a kid yawns, the system is going to be flooded with useless noise.
Exactly. But if you have a system that views that minor behavior alongside a wider context, everything changes.
How so?
Well, let's say the student puts their head down, but the system also shows they missed Monday morning.
Okay.
And the school nurse logged that they came in for an ice pack on Tuesday. And the cafeteria worker noted they haven't been eating lunch.
Oh, wow.
Suddenly, that tired kid in third period is exhibiting a significant warning sign. Safeguarding understanding depends entirely on pattern integration. It cannot be based on isolated interpretation by a single teacher.
So the chronology reveals the meaning that the single incident conceals. You have to lay the events out on a timeline to actually see the shape of the problem.
And to build a reliable timeline, you need absolute precision. Forensic work lives and dies on accuracy, detail, and careful objective documentation.
Why is the precision so crucial, though?
Because small errors compound and destroy timelines. If an investigator gets a transaction date wrong by even a week, the narrative of the fraud collapses and the case falls apart.
So for DSLs, this means the recording of these low-level concerns has to be completely bulletproof. It needs to be timely, and crucially, it must clearly separate fact from interpretation.
This is where most human-centered systems stumble. If a teacher writes in a file, Marcus was being aggressive and angry today, that is an interpretation.
Right, it's subjective.
Exactly. If a different professional reads that 3 months later, they don't know what it actually means. What does aggressive look like?
Yeah, that could mean shouting, or it could mean hitting.
But if the teacher writes, at 10:15 a.m., when asked to read aloud, Marcus threw his textbook against the wall and walked out of the classroom without speaking, that is a fact.
Ah, I see.
Strong safeguarding systems rely heavily on this disciplined, objective recording culture.
I cannot emphasize enough how important that distinction is. The exact objective wording of a behavioral chronology that you record today might feel really tedious in the moment.
Oh, for sure.
You might think, I'm way too busy to write down exactly how the textbook hit the wall. But months down the line, when social services or external agencies are involved and a much larger, darker picture is emerging, that precise objective note is the missing puzzle piece.
Yes. It provides the factual basis that allows intervention to legally and ethically happen. It is the mechanism that allows the system to protect the child. It allows for contextual review, it allows different departments to communicate effectively, and it allows for longitudinal pattern analysis.
Yeah.
But, and this is the critical warning, if you do not enforce that precise recording culture, you enter the most dangerous phase of organizational failure.
The normalization of risk. This is where the methodology really serves as a warning light for any organization.
Definitely. If leaders fail to build a culture of precise tracking, things don't blow up overnight.
Right.
The forensic accounting principle here is that massive corporate fraud rarely begins with $1 million heist. It begins with a $20 embezzlement that goes unnoticed. It develops through weak oversight. It develops through a phenomenon known as incremental drift.
Incremental drift. Let's unpack how that actually works on the ground, because it's honestly insidious.
Think of it like a choir where one person starts singing just slightly off key. At first, it's so subtle you think you might be imagining it. The conductor lets it go. The next day, someone else in the section matches that slightly off-key pitch.
Oh, no.
Yeah. Give it a month, and the entire choir is singing in the wrong key. But because this shift happens so gradually, day by day, note by note, the conductor doesn't even realize the song has completely changed.
Wow. The baseline of what is normal has shifted without anyone ever authorizing it.
Exactly. Applying this to a school, safeguarding failures emerge through unchallenged low-level behaviors. They emerge through fragmented communication.
Like the math teacher knows a student is struggling.
Right. And the gym teacher knows the student has unexplained bruises.
And the bus driver knows the student's parents are screaming at the bus stop.
But none of them talk to each other, and the system doesn't demand that they log the data centrally.
Because they just get used to it. The teachers start saying, oh, that's just how that family is, or that's just typical behavior for Marcus. He's always a bit rough.
They become acclimatized to the risk. You stop seeing the danger because the unacceptable has slowly become the everyday routine.
That's terrifying.
When you look at catastrophic safeguarding failures, the ones that make the evening news, They are almost always preceded by long periods of smaller, completely unnoticed or normalized warning signs.
There is a phrase from this framework that is deeply chilling, and I think it's the most memorable takeaway from this entire deep dive.
Which one?
Systems usually whisper before they collapse loudly.
Systems whisper before they collapse loudly. It's so true. If you aren't building a mechanism to listen to the whispers, the minor attendance shifts, the vague medical complaints, the subtle inconsistencies in a story, you're going to be completely blindsided by the collapse.
Okay, we have drawn all these amazing, highly analytical parallels between tracking money and tracking student well-being. We've talked about ledgers and timelines and pattern recognition, but we need to hit the brakes for a second because there is a massive ethical elephant in the room that we absolutely have to address. If we misapply this, we can do real harm.
You're referring to the boundary where the analogy fundamentally breaks down.
Yes, because at the end of the day, students are not criminal investigations. Human complexity cannot simply be reduced to an evidence trail or a ledger of liabilities.
Absolutely not.
A child is not a spreadsheet. If we treat a vulnerable teenager like a suspect in a fraud case, we are engaging in surveillance, not care.
That is a vital boundary, and it's one that must be explicitly managed by leadership. Safeguarding should never become a suspicion-driven adversarial process. The goal is not to catch a student in a lie the way an investigator traps a fraudster.
The motivations are entirely separate, even if the tools look similar. Let's lay out how a leader balances that.
Well, a forensic accountant investigates irregularity. Their mandate is to detect deception and protect assets.
Right.
A DSL protects and supports vulnerable human beings. The accountant follows documentary patterns to find guilt. The DSL follows emotional, behavioral, and relational patterns to provide human-centered intervention.
So one is financial systems analysis and the other is pastoral leadership.
Exactly.
It's the difference between building a trap for someone and building a safety net to catch someone who is falling.
I love that. Exactly. The methodology, the meticulous tracking, the appreciation for context, the intense curiosity about absence, that is what we are borrowing. But the application has to remain rooted in empathy.
So practically speaking, how does a school leader actually build this? How do you create this highly observant, pattern-aware culture without turning your math and science teachers into a bunch of paranoid private detectives looking for clues in every spilled carton of milk?
You have to build what is known as well-being literacy. And this isn't just a buzzword. It's a structural operational change. It means removing the friction for reporting. If a teacher has to fill out a complex 3-page document just to note that a student seems uncharacteristically withdrawn, they simply won't do it.
No, of course not. The friction is way too high.
But if you give them a secure, simple digital form where they can log a 1-sentence objective behavioral change at 30 seconds, you suddenly empower them to record the whispers.
You're lowering the barrier to entry for noticing things.
Yes. And well-being literacy also looks like dedicating the first 5 minutes of a weekly staff meeting to a low-level concern audit.
Oh, that's smart.
It's training your staff to understand that a single incident is just a data point. But their responsibility is to supply those data points to the central system without making grand assumptions. You teach them to explore missing information thoughtfully.
Like asking, "How are you?" instead of interrogating aggressively.
Exactly. The developmental pathway for a healthy organization is teaching staff to recognize subtle shifts across relational systems, backed up by a frictionless way to record them.
So, if we synthesize everything we've pulled apart today, what does this actually mean for you listening?
Good question.
Whether you manage a team of accountants or a classroom full of second graders, the overarching theme is that the work of protecting the people in your care demands disciplined, patient curiosity.
It is not about paranoia. It is not about making wild, dramatic assumptions the second someone is late for work or school.
No, it's the wisdom to notice when small pieces of ordinary information quietly stop making sense together. It's having the patience to sit with that inconsistency.
Right.
It's looking at the gaps, the silences, the things that almost fit, and exploring them carefully before the harm grows larger. It's realizing that the water stain on the ceiling isn't just a cosmetic issue you can paint over.
It's a symptom of a hidden reality that requires your attention.
To that end, I think there is a profound system-level reflection to leave on. A provocative question that applies to any culture or organization where people are responsible for the well-being of one another.
Sure.
Actually, I think you should ask it.
Oh, sure. The question to carry forward into your own workplace is this. In your own culture or systems, what small inconsistencies, gaps, or repeated low-level concerns might already be quietly signaling a larger story that nobody has fully connected together yet?
What an incredible question to leave on. Look at the gaps. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Whether you're balancing a ledger or looking out for a student, remember that the most important clues rarely shout. They whisper. Stay curious. Keep noticing what quietly fails to make sense, and we will catch you on the next deep dive.